There are places on Earth that barely register by any normal measure. Not famous cities, not postcard landmarks, but places so strange they force you to question what's real. Towering rock spires disappearing into dense fog. Entire structures carved deep inside mountains. Ancient landscapes swallowed by water for centuries. Together, they feel less like parts of our world and more like fragments of another planet. And most people will never see them with their own eyes. So what if Earth is far stranger than we've been led to believe? What if these unreal places have been out there all along? Right now, we're about to cross into a series of extraordinary locations where the line between nature, humanity, and imagination begins to disappear. Our first stop takes us to a place where the boundary between land and sea is never truly fixed. From a distance, Mont Saint-Michel rises from the water like an isolated stone fortress. Crowned with towering walls, narrow houses, and an ancient abbey perched at its peak. Set within one of Europe's most extreme tidal bays, the entire landscape transforms dramatically within just a few hours. When the tide retreats, the sea pulls far back, exposing a massive stretch of sand around the island and revealing a temporary path from the mainland. But the surface is deceptive. Beneath it lie unstable mudflats and hidden currents powerful enough to trap anyone who missteps. Then, without warning, the tide returns. Water surges back across the bay at astonishing speed, swallowing every route in and cutting Mont Saint-Michel off from the rest of the world completely. This cycle repeats day after day, sometimes connected to the mainland, sometimes isolated in the middle of the sea. And yet, for centuries, people have continued to live here. Adapting to the relentless rhythm of nature in one of the most unstable landscapes on Earth. A nearly 80-meter-tall pink tower, wrapped from base to summit by a massive dragon. Wat Samphran Dragon Temple is one of the strangest structures ever built. And the dragon isn't just decoration. Inside its body is a spiraling passageway that winds all the way to the top, following the exact curves seen on the outside of the building. The exterior and interior are physically connected, turning the dragon itself into part of the experience. From a distance, the contrast is almost surreal. A rigid cylindrical tower, locked inside the flowing shape of a serpent. And depending on the angle, the entire structure seems to twist and move, even though it never does. Yet beneath the bizarre design, life continues as normal. Inside, prayer halls and living spaces still function like those of an ordinary temple. Hidden within one of the most visually unsettling buildings on Earth. Xixi National Wetland Park doesn't feel like solid land at all. It's a maze of water, mud, and dense vegetation spread across the heart of a modern city. Hundreds of narrow canals, shallow marshes, and scattered patches of earth divide the entire landscape into a network with almost no clear boundaries. There are few real roads here. Movement happens along floating walkways, weathered wooden bridges, or small boats slipping silently through tight channels of water. And the terrain never stays the same for long. As the seasons change, water levels rise and fall, flooding some areas while exposing others, constantly reshaping the landscape and altering the paths people use to cross it. What makes Xixi so unsettling is its instability. The environment feels fragmented. Reeds and low trees block your view in every direction, making it surprisingly easy for you to lose all sense of orientation. It's not the kind of place that seems meant for human settlement. Yet even here, you begin to understand how people have continued to navigate, live, and build within this shifting boundary between land and water for centuries. An isolated mass of stone, sealed off by sheer vertical cliffs, Mont Aiguille seems almost designed to resist human access. Rising more than 2,000 meters above the surrounding landscape, the mountain is encircled by steep rock walls on nearly every side, forming what looks like a completely sealed fortress of stone. Its summit is broad and flat, yet there are no natural trails leading to the top. From below, you see an unbroken surface, a continuous wall of rock with no obvious point of entry. For centuries, that isolation made Mont Aiguille seem unreachable. It wasn't until 1492, during the reign of Charles VIII, that the mountain was finally climbed for the first time. Even today, reaching the summit depends entirely on technical climbing. There are no roads, no gradual paths, and no safer routes around it. Every ascent forces you to confront the cliffs head-on. From the outside, you barely see a structure at all. Dambulla Cave Temple is hidden inside a massive rock formation where entire temples have been carved directly into natural caves. And the moment you step inside, the space feels unfamiliar. There are almost no walls or ceilings in the conventional sense. The mountain itself becomes the structure. Raw stone curves overhead, enclosing a network of connected chambers carved deep into the rock. Everything feels compressed, seamless, and enclosed, with almost no clear separation between what was built by humans and what already existed naturally. Inside the caves, enormous Buddha statues rest directly against the stone floor and walls, some stretching the full shape of the cavern itself. Murals cover nearly every surface, painted straight onto the uneven rock without the smooth foundations normally used in traditional architecture. But what makes Dambulla truly unsettling is how completely it disappears into the landscape. There's no visible exterior dominating the horizon. No distinct building standing apart from nature. The entire complex exists hidden inside the mountain. As if the rock itself had been hollowed out and turned into a living sanctuary. It begins with a narrow stone bridge, followed by more than 200 steps carved into the side of a cliff. That is the only way to reach Gaztelugatxe, path never moves in a straight line. Instead, it twists constantly with the shape of the terrain, clinging to a rocky outcrop surrounded by open sea. Some sections widen briefly, others tighten into confined passages, forcing each step through a narrow strip of space suspended above the water. The entire route feels fused to the landscape itself, less like a structure built on the cliff and more like an extension of the rock beneath it. At the summit sits a small chapel overlooking the Atlantic. And from there, the isolation becomes unmistakable. Everything here depends on the single path beneath your feet, one exposed route winding between steep slopes and crashing ocean winds with no alternative way in or out. You don't enter a castle here, you step inside a mountain of stone. Uchisar Castle was carved directly into the rock itself, shaped over time into stacked chambers, hidden alcoves, and narrow passageways that follow the natural form of the cliff. As you move deeper inside, tight corridors and steep vertical routes slowly pull you higher. The entire structure rises upward through the rock, using the height of the terrain instead of spreading outward across the land. Scattered openings cut into the surface serve as both windows and sources of light, casting sharp contrasts between brightness and shadow on every level. There are no separate walls, no outer shell hiding the structure beneath. Every surface is raw stone, left exposed. And that's what makes the experience unsettling. Even inside, you never feel like you're in a building. You feel trapped inside a massive solid form that has been deliberately hollowed out, where space was created not by adding materials, but by carving them away. At the foot of the towering Huangshan Mountains stands one of the most enduring architectural symbols of southwest China: 3 pagodas of Chongsheng Temple. More than 1,100 years old, the pagodas have survived centuries of powerful earthquakes, yet still rise with remarkable elegance against the dramatic mountain landscape. The complex is made up of 3 white brick pagodas arranged in a perfect triangle. At the center stands the main tower, Qianshun Pagoda, soaring nearly 69 meters high across 16 levels. Built in the style of the Tang dynasty, it carries a quiet sense of power and balance. Two smaller pagodas stand symmetrically on either side, creating a striking harmony between human design and the vast mountain backdrop. But the most surreal moment comes at the mirror pond below, where you suddenly see all three towers reflected perfectly across the still water. Forming an almost unreal symmetry, like something painted onto a canvas. Far from the chaos of modern cities, this place feels suspended in time. It's not just a monument to admire, but a reminder of the engineering, vision, and craftsmanship left behind by an ancient civilization. Mount Wutai was not formed around a single mountain peak, but as a group of 5 separate summits with wide valleys stretching between them. Because of this, the entire area does not rise in one continuous slope, but instead forms multiple distinct layers of elevation. As you move across the landscape, more than 50 temples appear at different heights. Some structures are located in the valleys, others are built along the mountain slopes, and some stand close to the highest peaks. These locations are not isolated from one another. They are connected by routes that follow the natural terrain, extending through multiple layers of space and elevation. This arrangement allows the entire complex to spread naturally across the structure of the mountain instead of concentrating around a single fixed point. The architecture adapts directly to the mountain's existing layers, creating a vertically connected space where each structure is closely tied to its exact position on the slope. Standing among these mountain layers, you begin to understand why Mount Wutai remains a hidden gem for those seeking a combination of breathtaking natural scenery and deep historical and cultural value. More than 100 meters underground, Salina Turda no longer feels like a traditional salt mine. Instead, it opens into a massive underground space carved directly into ancient salt rock. The deeper you descend, the more the entire structure feels detached from the surface world. Formed from old mining chambers, the space was gradually expanded into enormous halls, some stretching dozens of meters high, surrounded by steep walls of solid salt. Inside, the different sections are connected by stairways, corridors, and elevator shafts that descend through multiple underground levels. Some areas open into huge dome-like caverns, large enough to hold a Ferris wheel, sports courts, and observation platforms, creating the surreal feeling of a hidden structure buried deep beneath the earth. What makes the place especially striking is the material itself. Every surface is natural salt, formed over millions of years, with visible mineral layers running across the walls. Once the artificial lighting cuts through the darkness, you begin to feel the strange scale of the underground interior, both rough and strangely empty, yet still stable inside an enormous geological mass that has been deliberately hollowed out from within. Stretching across a dry plain covering more than 100 square kilometers, Bagan feels less like an ancient city and more like a vast architectural forest rising from an otherwise empty landscape. More than 2,000 temples and pagodas from the old Bagan kingdom still remain scattered across the plain, creating an unusually dense concentration of monuments on terrain that is almost completely flat. Most of the structures were built from baked brick, designed in stacked tiers that gradually narrow toward the top, forming vertical shapes that seem to rise directly into the sky. Even though each temple has its own distinct details, they all follow a similar multi-tiered tower form. Seen from a distance, the entire region takes on a repeating architectural rhythm that stretches endlessly across the horizon. The temples are spaced neither too close nor too far apart, far enough for each structure to stand clearly on its own, yet close enough to feel connected as part of one enormous system spread across the plain. The longer you look, the more the landscape itself begins to change. Thousands of vertical structures break the emptiness of the open land, transforming the entire plain into something that feels deliberately shaped by human hands centuries ago. If there's a place where the line between earth and sky seems to disappear, it's Huangshan Mountains during the arrival of the famous Sea of Clouds. At elevations above 1,800 meters, the granite peaks of Huangshan rise through thick layers of drifting cloud, while the lower parts of the mountains vanish completely from view. What remains are sharp stone spires, ancient pine trees clinging to cliff faces, and narrow ridge lines suspended above a white ocean of fog. The clouds never stay still. They constantly shift and flow, rising, sinking, and rolling through the valleys, making the entire landscape feel alive and in motion. When the cloud layer grows denser, the mountain peaks begin to look like isolated stone islands floating in empty space. Thin pathways trace the edges of the cliffs, following the steep terrain as they curve around massive, natural rock formations. Up here, the scenery changes, with both elevation and cloud movement, creating a layered world that feels at once completely real. And somehow detached from the earth below. Carved into a sandstone cliff at the edge of the Gobi Desert, Mogao Caves looks like an entire mountainside that has been hollowed out from within. More than 700 cave chambers are stacked vertically along the face of the rock, forming one of the largest cave temple systems ever created. Narrow corridors and steep stairways cling to the cliffside, linking one cave to the next. The deeper you move through the complex, the more it feels as though the entire structure was gradually carved directly into the mountain itself. Inside each chamber, the walls and ceilings are covered with murals and clay sculptures built directly onto the raw stone surface. Light enters only through small openings, creating a sharp contrast between the harsh desert outside and the enclosed spaces hidden within the cliff. Together, the caves form a massive architectural system shaped by excavation rather than construction. Where the architecture does not stand apart from the landscape, but grows directly from the natural form of the mountain. Rather than being built on open ground, Monastery of St. Simon was carved directly into the sandstone cliffs of a canyon in Cairo, with the entire worship complex embedded inside the natural rock formation itself. The moment you step inside, the scale feels unexpected. A series of connected rock chambers opens into a massive space, capable of holding tens of thousands of people, especially during major religious gatherings. These areas were gradually expanded from the original stone mass, linked together by narrow passageways that follow the steep canyon walls. The deeper you move into the complex, the more the terrain itself becomes the framework of the architecture. The ceilings and walls still retain their raw stone surfaces, shaped only enough to create usable space. Above, light filters down through openings in the rock, casting sharp contrasts between brightness and shadow across the interior. The entire monastery feels less like a structure built inside the mountain, and more like a hidden world carved directly into the heart of the canyon itself. In southern India, Hampi feels like an ancient city scattered across a massive sea of granite, where the natural landscape became the foundation of the entire Vijayanagara Empire civilization. Instead of being built on flat ground, temples and stone gateways were placed directly among enormous rock formations with strange, almost unreal shapes. In some places, a single giant boulder serves as the base of an entire structure. In others, temple complexes sit hidden between stacked layers of granite, making the architecture feel almost fused into the terrain itself. Moving through the site means passing along paths carved through stone, stairways clinging to steep slopes, and narrow routes winding through the valleys. There is no single central axis. Instead, the city spreads outward in separate clusters, each one shaped by the specific landscape around it. That complete dependence on rock and terrain is what makes Hampi so distinctive. It doesn't feel like a city built on the landscape. It feels like a city carved directly into it. Clinging to a limestone cliff more than 120 meters high in Slovenia, Predjama Castle appears to disappear directly into the mountain itself rather than stand in front of it. Built around 800 years ago, the castle is famous for its unusual structure. Partly exposed on the outside, while the rest extends deep into the cave system hidden behind the cliff. The visible front section forms only a thin architectural layer attached to the vertical rock face. Behind it, the castle expands into a network of natural caves stretching hundreds of meters into the mountain. Living quarters, storage rooms, and passageways were built directly into the existing hollow spaces of the rock, using the mountain's natural structure as part of the fortress itself. One of the most striking details is the way the castle rises across multiple levels that follow the height of the cliff, connected through pathways running between the caves and the open exterior. Predjama stands out for its raw, rugged appearance and for holding the Guinness World Record as the largest cave castle in the world. It's a place that showcases an extraordinary level of creativity, where the castle was designed not only as a fortress to live in, but as a structure meant to hide within the mountain itself. The journey into Petra begins through the Siq. A natural canyon stretching more than 1.2 kilometers, so narrow that the sandstone walls, rising nearly 80 meters high, almost close together overhead. The deeper you go, the tighter the space becomes, with sunlight slipping through only thin openings above. Then suddenly, the canyon breaks apart. Right in front of you stands Al-Khazneh, or the Treasury, a facade nearly 40 meters tall, carved directly into the rose-red cliff itself. Every column, statue, and decorative detail was sculpted from a single mass of stone. As the light changes throughout the day, the surface shifts in color, sometimes glowing in vivid shades of red and gold, other times fading back into the darker tones of the mountain wall behind it. The transition is what makes Petra unforgettable. You move from a dark, narrowing passage into a vast open space without warning, creating the feeling that you've crossed a natural boundary into an entire world carved straight into the heart of the mountain. Built from nearly 2 million volcanic stone blocks, fitted together without mortar, Borobudur rises like a massive stone lotus above the mist-covered valleys of central Java. The structure is made up of 9 stacked levels, gradually ascending toward the summit. One of its most striking features is the ring of 72 perforated bell-shaped stupas, each enclosing a seated Buddha statue inside. At sunrise, the tops of these stupas slowly emerge through the thick morning fog, giving the entire monument an almost dreamlike appearance. Along the terraces and passageways are more than 2,600 finely carved relief panels stretching nearly 5 kilometers in total. Together, they tell ancient stories in a continuous and remarkably detailed sequence. Borobudur doesn't rely on bright colors or elaborate decoration to create its impact. Instead, its power comes from sheer scale, layered geometry, and the dark gray tone of volcanic stone. Making the monument feel both incredibly massive and strangely lighter as you climb higher through its ascending levels. Rising to 7,556 meters, Mount Gongga is known as the King of the Mountains of Sichuan. But what makes it truly extraordinary isn't just its height, it's the mountain's overwhelming isolation from the surrounding landscape. The main peak rises abruptly above a network of deep valleys and dense glacier systems, creating an elevation difference of more than 6,000 meters from the lowlands below within a relatively short distance. That extreme contrast makes the mountain appear like a colossal mass of ice and stone, separated entirely from the world beneath it. Surrounding the summit are sharp ridgelines and massive glaciers that constantly change with the weather and shifting light. Thick clouds often wrap around the slopes, hiding most of the mountain while leaving only the highest peak visible. Making it seem as though the summit is emerging from an endless sea of clouds. Human presence here is minimal, allowing the landscape to remain raw, harsh, and largely untouched. Because of this, Mount Gongga stands as one of the most dramatic mountain formations in Asia, where extreme elevation, permanent ice, and moving cloud layers combine into a natural structure that feels almost completely detached from the earth below. On the Tibetan plateau stands a mountain that feels almost completely separated from the movement of the Himalayas around it. Mount Kailash. Rising more than 6,600 meters high, the mountain is known for its remarkably symmetrical shape and 4 steep faces that rise almost vertically from the surrounding landscape. Unlike most major peaks in the world, Mount Kailash has never been climbed. Partly because of its near-impassable rock walls, but also because the mountain is considered sacred across multiple religions. Here, people do not attempt to conquer the summit. Instead, they walk around it. Pilgrims follow a 52-kilometer route circling the base of the mountain, passing through dry valleys, sacred lakes, and lower surrounding ridges that form a natural enclosure around the central rock mass. But what truly sets Kailash apart is the silence. The mountain stands in near total stillness, isolated within one of the harshest landscapes on Earth. Combined with the many mysteries and unanswered stories surrounding it, Kailash feels less like an ordinary mountain. And more like something deliberately set apart from the rest of the world. Carved directly downward from a massive volcanic rock plateau, Lalibela rock-hewn churches appears like a hidden city buried beneath the surface of the earth. Here, the architecture was not built upward. It was cut directly out of solid stone. Without using brick or mortar, the entire complex was created by removing layers of rock until the shapes of the churches slowly emerged deep below the surrounding ground level. All 11 churches are connected through a network of narrow tunnels, stone corridors, and passageways carved straight through the rock, forming an interconnected underground system. The most famous is Beata Georgis, a perfectly shaped cross standing about 15 meters high, sculpted entirely from a single block of stone. Every detail, from the roof to the columns, remains part of the original rock mass itself. That method of carving away stone, rather than constructing with separate materials, is what makes Lalibela so extraordinary. The result is an underground architectural world where the boundary between nature and human creation almost completely disappears. Standing at the meeting point of 3 rivers in Sichuan, Leshan Giant Buddha is not only the tallest stone Buddha statue in the world, but also an extraordinary achievement of ancient engineering. The entire statue was carved directly into a red sandstone cliff, rising about 71 meters high and blending seamlessly into the surrounding landscape. Each of the Buddha's feet is large enough to hold around 100 people, while the head alone reaches nearly 14.7 meters tall and contains 1,021 carefully carved spiral hair coils. Hidden inside the structure is an advanced drainage system built more than 1,200 years ago. Channels carved throughout the statue direct rainwater away from the surface, helping protect the stone from erosion over centuries. It's this combination of massive scale, direct cliffside carving, and remarkably sophisticated water engineering that gives the Leshan Giant Buddha its unique presence. Both calm and monumental, while revealing the technical brilliance of the civilization that created it. Hidden within the Turpan Basin, Flaming Mountains stretches across the desert as a massive range of red sandstone ridges, where surface temperatures can rise above 70 degrees Celsius during the summer. Under the intense sunlight, the entire landscape appears to be burning. The region is made up of heavily eroded hills and cliffs, carved over time into deep grooves and constantly twisting rock formations. Throughout the day, the stone shifts in color from dark red to bright orange, becoming especially vivid at noon when direct sunlight makes the mountains seem almost illuminated from within. What makes the area so striking is its extreme harshness. The climate is brutally hot and dry, rainfall is almost non-existent, and the cracked ground supports almost no vegetation at all. In a place this unforgiving, the landscape itself becomes the main focus, where heat, time, and erosion have sculpted the rock into sharp and rugged forms unlike almost anywhere else on Earth. Beneath the surface of Qiandao Lake lies Shicheng, known as Lion City, an ancient city preserved underwater like a place frozen in time. Since being submerged in 1959, the city has remained nearly 40 meters below the lake's surface. More than 1,300 years old, Shicheng still retains much of its original urban layout, including streets, archways, homes, and even wooden and stone architectural structures. The cold water and relatively calm conditions beneath the lake helped preserve the city in remarkable detail. From a diver's perspective, carved stone walls decorated with dragons, phoenixes, and traditional patterns can still be seen clearly through the water. What makes Shicheng so extraordinary is that the city was not destroyed. It was simply submerged in place. Much of its original layout from the Ming and Qing dynasties remains intact beneath the lake. Because of this, Shicheng has become one of the rare underwater cities in the world where the architectural structure survives almost unchanged. Like a hidden layer of history resting silently beneath the water. Across the nearly rainless desert of southern Peru, the Nazca Lines stretch across the landscape like a giant system of drawings that only fully reveal themselves from high above the ground. The entire site consists of hundreds of straight lines, geometric patterns, and enormous figures of animals, including birds, monkeys, and spiders, created by removing the dark surface stones to expose the lighter sand beneath. Some of the lines extend for several kilometers while maintaining an almost perfect straightness. Despite being created more than 2,000 years ago. What makes the Nazca Lines so remarkable is their scale and precision. Spread across more than 500 square kilometers of dry desert, the carvings have survived for centuries without being erased by weather or erosion. The result feels almost surreal. A monumental landscape artwork where the desert floor itself becomes something more than rock and sand, transforming into a vast canvas believed to carry astronomical and spiritual meaning directed toward the sky above. Deep within the Wuling Mountains of Guizhou, Mount Fanjing stands out not only for its dramatic landscape of steep stone pillars, rising more than 2,400 meters above sea level, but also for the spiritual reason this remote place was chosen in the first place. The mountain is considered sacred in Buddhism, especially in connection with Maitreya Buddha. And for centuries, monks came here seeking isolation, far removed from the world below. That natural isolation shaped the architecture itself. The most striking structures were built on the highest rock formations, where two small temples sit atop completely separated stone peaks, connected only by a narrow bridge suspended over open space. There are no wide foundations or traditional building platforms here. Every structure clings directly to the rock, using the mountain itself as part of the architecture. The climb to the summit follows a winding system of stairways carved into near vertical cliffs. As the elevation changes, so do the slopes, the views, and the sense of exposure, making the journey feel inseparable from the terrain itself. Neither fully land nor entirely separate from the sea, Skellig Michael rises from the Atlantic like an isolated mass of rock. where everything seems suspended in complete separation from the rest of the world. At the summit stands a monastery dating back to the 6th to 8th centuries, built entirely from dry stacked stone. Small beehive-shaped stone huts are scattered across the steep slopes, clinging to narrow ledges and rocky outcrops, making the monastery feel less like something built on the island and more like part of the island itself. The only path to the top is a staircase of nearly 600 stone steps carved directly into the cliff face, winding upward along the island's near-vertical slopes. It serves not only as a route of ascent, but as the main spine connecting the entire settlement. Skellig Michael stands as an extraordinary example of human endurance. A remote spiritual fortress where the line between survival and absolute isolation is separated only by rough stone walls and the endless ocean surrounding them. Stretching across the deep Apurimac River Canyon in Peru, Xixi Rope Bridge is not a permanent bridge in the modern sense, but a suspended structure woven entirely from ichu grass. Measuring about 30 meters long and hanging nearly 50 meters above the river, the bridge appears fragile against the massive canyon around it. The entire structure is built using an ancient Inca technique preserved for more than 500 years. Bundles of grass are twisted into ropes, then braided together to form the bridge deck, handrails, and suspension cables. There is no metal, no rigid framework. Its stability depends entirely on tension, balance, and the strength of the woven natural fibers. What makes Xixi truly unique is its life cycle. Once every year, local communities gather to dismantle the old bridge and weave a completely new one during a multi-day ceremonial tradition. In this way, rebuilding the bridge becomes more than construction. It becomes a collective cultural ritual passed down through generations. Because of that, Xixi remains one of the most original suspension bridges left in the world, where the architecture survives through continuous renewal rather than permanence. From the base of the mountain, Mount Hua looks almost vertical. A massive wall of sandstone, rising at near 90-degree angles, and lifting the entire landscape more than 2,100 meters into the sky. Because of that terrain, the climb does not follow a single continuous trail. Instead, the route is broken into narrow sections attached directly to the cliff face. Combining steep stone stairways carved into the mountain with wooden walkways barely wide enough for one person to pass. In some places, the path seems to detach completely from the mountain itself, turning into wooden planks bolted directly onto sheer vertical rock. The higher you climb, the more suddenly the terrain opens onto rare flat ledges, where small temples appear tucked into the few natural spaces left between the towering cliff walls. That constant compression of space, from massive rock faces to narrow cliffside paths, makes Mount Hua feel less like a normal mountain trail and more like a vertical system of movement, where height shapes every part of the experience. A massive temple created by removing an entire mountain around it, Kailasa Temple remains one of the boldest rock-cut structures ever created in India. The entire temple was carved directly from a single block of basalt within the Ellora Caves complex. Instead of building the structure from the outside upward, ancient craftsmen removed enormous amounts of solid rock to gradually reveal the temple from within. Inside are open courtyards, shrines, and rows of carved pillars, all sculpted directly from the original stone mass. The result creates the strange feeling that the temple had always existed, hidden inside the mountain, waiting to be uncovered. Seen as a whole, Kailasa Temple no longer feels like architecture that was constructed piece by piece. It feels more like the inner core of the mountain itself. Exposed after the outer layers of stone were carefully cut away. And when the journey through these places finally comes to an end, what remains is the feeling that Earth is far larger and far stranger than we usually imagine. There are still places that exist in silence, far beyond the reach of most people. Maybe the real question isn't how many places we've already seen, but how many worlds like these are still waiting to be discovered. And perhaps, even after stopping here, the journey through the blurred edges of reality is not truly over. If you know of other surreal places hidden across the planet, leave them in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue exploring the mysteries and extraordinary landscapes that still remain out there.